The rope wasn't even tight. That was the detail nobody expected to matter, and the detail that mattered most. Bruce Lee stood in the center of a cramped Los Angeles gymnasium, his right arm bound behind his back with a length of ordinary training rope, while a man nearly twice his size circled him with a loose, confident stride of someone who had already decided how the next 90 seconds would end. Nobody in that room, not the fighter, not the trainers lining the walls, not Bruce himself, understood yet that they were about to watch a lesson in what a single hand, guided by 20 years of discipline, could do that two untrained hands never could. This is the story of that afternoon. It is told the way legends are told, passed from student to student, embellished at the edges, uncertain in its details, because that is what it is. A legend, not a court transcript, but like most legends, it carries a truth worth sitting with. The setup: Los Angeles, early 1970s. A converted warehouse space near Chinatown that doubled as a boxing gym on weekday mornings and a martial arts school in the evenings. The air smelled the way every serious training space smells: leather, sweat, chalk, and the particular mustiness of a building that has absorbed decades of hard work into its walls. Bruce Lee had been teaching a small private class, the kind he preferred by then. No more than a handful of serious students, no cameras, no press. He was 31 years old, at the peak of both his physical conditioning and his philosophical development, deep into the ideas that would eventually be published as his notes on Jeet Kune Do. The belief that style was a cage, that rigid systems produced rigid fighters, and that the only art worth practicing was the art of using exactly what a moment required and nothing more. Into that quiet evening walked a man named Marcus Kane, a heavyweight boxer with a modest professional record and an outsized reputation in the local gym circuit for two things: his punching power and his mouth. Kane stood 6'3" and weighed well over 200 pounds, built the way heavyweight boxers are built, thick through the shoulders, heavy in the hands, carrying the kind of mass that had ended most of his sparring sessions early. He'd heard the rumors that circulated through every serious fight gym in Los Angeles that year, that the small Chinese actor from television, the one who talked about martial arts philosophy in interviews, could supposedly move faster than the eye could track. Kane didn't believe it. He'd heard versions of that claim about a dozen different men over the years, and every one of them had turned out to be exactly the size they looked, which was to say, not big enough. "You really believe all this kung fu talk works on somebody my size?" Kane said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, the way men say things when they want an audience rather than an answer. Bruce didn't respond right away. He finished correcting a student's stance, unhurried, the way he did everything. Then he turned. "Size matters less than most people think," he said. "Technique matters more." Kane laughed, not cruelly, just with the easy dismissiveness of a man who has never had a reason to doubt his own physics. "Then let's test that. Right now. And to make it interesting," he grinned, already enjoying the idea forming, "you fight me with one hand, behind your back. Both hands even the odds too much for me." The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when someone has said something that cannot be walked back without a loss of face on one side or the other. The acceptance. Bruce studied him for a long moment. There was no anger in his expression, no wounded pride. If anything, there was something closer to curiosity, the look of a man being handed an interesting problem rather than an insult. "All right," he said simply. That was it. No speech, no negotiation. One of his students, a young man named Danny, who trained with him most evenings, stepped forward with quiet concern. "You don't have to prove anything to him." "I know," Bruce said, "but he asked a question. I'm going to answer it." They cleared space in the center of the gym. Not much, maybe 15 feet across, bounded by heavy bags on one side and a row of folding chairs on the other. Word had already traveled 2 doors down to a boxing class finishing up its own session, and within minutes the makeshift ring had drawn perhaps 25 spectators, mostly boxers and their trainers, a few of Bruce's own students, all of them wearing the specific expression of people who suspect they are about to watch either a demonstration or a disaster and aren't sure which. Danny took the rope from a nearby equipment rack and, at Bruce's instruction, wrapped it around his right wrist and the small of his back, not brutally tight, just enough to keep the arm pinned and useless. Bruce rolled his left shoulder once, shook out his left hand, and settled into a stance that used his legs and his single free hand as though that had always been the plan. Cain, for his part, raised both gloved fists and grinned at the small crowd that had gathered. This was exactly the kind of story he liked being the center of. The fight. The trainer who agreed to referee, an older man with the flattened nose and cauliflower ears of someone who had taken up boxing before it was fashionable to wear a mouthguard, called for a clean 3-minute round. Light contact. First clear opening ends it. Cain opened with what he always opened with, a testing jab, thrown to gauge reaction time more than to land. It found nothing but air. Bruce's head had already moved 4 inches to the left, so economically that half the room would later argue about whether they'd actually seen him move or simply registered that the punch had missed. Cain pressed forward, a right cross, thrown with real intention this time, the kind of punch that had ended sparring sessions early for grown men who outweighed most of Bruce's actual body weight combined into a single limb. Bruce didn't block it. He wasn't where it arrived. He'd stepped in at an angle rather than away. The counterintuitive move that every boxing instructor spends years trying to drill out of beginners, because instinct says retreat from power and Bruce's instinct said something else entirely. Get close enough that the power has nowhere to build. For the first 30 seconds, Bruce threw nothing back. He simply wasn't where Cain's fists went. Left hook missed. Body shot, missed by the width of a shirt seam. Cain's confidence, which had started the round as easy amusement, began curdling into something tighter and more determined. He was a professional. He did not miss this many punches against amateurs, let alone against a man fighting with one arm bound to his side. The room had gone very quiet. The sound that filled it instead was simply Cain's breathing, growing heavier, and the soft scuff of feet on the wooden floor. At the 40-second mark, Cain committed to a combination, jab, cross, hook, thrown with real weight behind each punch, the kind of sequence meant to close distance and force an opening. Bruce's single free hand rose in a short arc, no wasted motion, no wind-up a trained I could read in advance, and intercepted the lead hand before the combination could fully develop. The contact was light, a redirection rather than a block, but it was enough to spoil Cain's timing entirely. His hook, thrown into a target that was no longer where it should have been, sailed past Bruce's shoulder and pulled Cain's own balance forward half a step too far. That was the opening. Bruce's left hand came up in a short, controlled strike to Cain's exposed ribs, not a full power shot, nothing that would have hospitalized a heavyweight, but placed with enough precision that the room heard the sound of contact clearly. A sharp exhale forced out of Cain involuntarily. Cain staggered back half a step, more startled than hurt, hand instinctively going to his side. He reset, angrier now, and came forward again with more force than technique. Bruce moved through the attack the way water moves around a rock, not resisting it, simply not being where it needed him to be. And when the opening came a second time, he didn't take it. He could have. Several of the boxers watching later said as much. Instead, he stepped back, dropped his guard slightly, and let the moment pass. That's enough, he said quietly. The turn. Cain stood there breathing hard, gloves still raised, processing something that didn't fit the world as he understood it. He had thrown perhaps a dozen serious punches at a man using one arm out of two, and connected with none of them. He had been countered twice, and the second time, the counter had simply stopped. You could have hit me again, Cain said. It wasn't quite a question. I could have. Bruce agreed. There wasn't a reason to. Cain pulled off his gloves, and something in his posture had changed, not defeated exactly, but recalibrated, like a man who has just discovered a room in his own house he never knew existed. I don't understand how you saw that combination coming. I've thrown that on guys twice your size, and it's landed. You throw it the same way every time, Bruce said. Same rhythm, same setup. Once I saw it, I only needed to see it once. And the one hand, that wasn't even a disadvantage for you. Bruce considered the question seriously, the way he considered most questions. One hand tied doesn't take away technique. It only takes away the illusion that you need two. Most fighters use their hands to cover mistakes their feet already made. Take away one hand, and you find out how many mistakes were there the whole time. Cain sat down on one of the folding chairs, still catching his breath, and for a long moment said nothing at all. Then he extended his actual hand, not a glove, and Bruce shook it. "I came in here to prove a point," Kane admitted. "I think you just proved a different one." The lesson, what Bruce said next, according to the version of this story that has circulated for decades among martial artists who trace their lineage back to his teaching, wasn't really about the fight at all. "People think fighting is about what you have," he told the room, students and boxers both leaning in without quite meaning to. "More reach, more weight, 2 hands instead of 1. But a fight is decided by what you understand, not what you're carrying into it. I could take away your whole arm, and you'd still be more dangerous than most men with both of theirs. If you understood distance and timing the way you understand your own punch, the hand was never the weapon. The hand was just where the weapon happened to end." He picked up the rope Danny had used to bind his arm, turned it once in his free hand, almost thoughtfully. "Empty your cup," he said, a phrase he returned to often, borrowed from an old teaching story about a scholar who arrived seeking wisdom with a mind already too full to receive it. Most people fight with the strength they think they have. The real work is understanding the strength you actually have, and using exactly that much, not more, not less. The legacy. Marcus Kane, in the version of this story that has been retold in gyms for years, never became a household name. He didn't need to. What he carried out of that Chinatown warehouse wasn't a loss on a record book. There was no record book, no referee's card, nothing official at all. What he carried out was smaller and, by most accounts, more permanent. The specific, humbling knowledge that his idea of dominance had been built on an assumption nobody had ever bothered to test properly. 2 hands were not automatically stronger than 1, if the one hand belonged to someone who had spent 2 decades learning exactly what it was for. Whether every detail of this story happened precisely as it's been told is impossible to say with certainty. That's the nature of a legend passed hand to hand rather than filmed and archived. But the philosophy at its center is not in question. It's the same philosophy Bruce Lee wrote about in his notebooks, taught in his classes, and spent his short life trying to embody. That mastery isn't measured by what tools you're given, but by how completely you understand the ones you already have. A rope around one wrist couldn't take away 20 years of understanding. That, more than anything that happened in those 90 seconds, is the part of the story worth remembering.